sundress. Everybody's yelling their team's the best. But man, I must confess, I like them all. When the southern leaves drop off the trees, my heart stops on every dime I see. Man, I get this feeling every fall. Tuscaloosa and Auburn too, UTUK and LSU. On this fun-filled Nesmith 10.
What is up, everybody? Opening with a little Girls of the SEC by Chase Rice. That's how you know college football is right around the corner for the week, as we got Rice versus Charlotte, I believe, opening the college football week. On with the man himself. You know him, you love him, Mr. Robert Donaldson. Rob, what's going on, my man?
Hey, man. Yeah, thank you for bringing me on. Love me some Chase Rice. Love me some college football. And yeah, it's unfortunate that we're opening up with Rice Charlotte, and it was kind of like a standalone Thursday game. And hey, at least we have an awesome Saturday and Friday slate. Well, more so Saturday than Friday. And yeah, the football season's already off and running, which is a blast.
Well, this is where back in our college days, we'd be preparing to go out to Dollar Bottles somewhere, you know, getting ready for the college football weekend. Now, I didn't go to a big-time D1 sports school. I went to Towson, so our college football Saturdays were a little different, but just can't imagine being on the D1 campus. My niece informed me a couple of weeks ago that she wanted to go to Tennessee, so her name's Audrey. I was like, Audrey, you know, Tennessee had a really big game. And she goes, oh, yeah, they were talking about how it's Megan Maroney's school versus Morgan Wallen's. I'm like, if that gets you to watch the game, that gets you to watch the game. So now she wasn't a big college football fan, but now she's at least watching thanks to Megan Maroney and Morgan Wallen. So, but what a game there, man. I mean, college football is the greatest. I mean, two amazing finishes with, that game and Gunnar Stockton showing he is a dude for sure. And then your boy Marcel Reed and Texas A&M getting the win in South Bend, maybe all but saying bye-bye to the Irish. So just give us some general thoughts on this year so far, man.
Yeah, no, it's already been fantastic. Obviously, the narrative has kind of been rewritten again on Alabama right out the gate. There's been a number of different teams. Clemson was a national title contender. Now they already have two L's next to their name. Everybody wanted Brian Kelly fired is kind of the stemming from that. And now they're the number 3 team in the entire country. So it's one of those things where their narratives are going to continue to change. We are 3 weeks in, truly 4 weeks in, but week 3 of the college football season is kind of what we just surpassed. And now it's when you're thinking about it in terms of kind of chunks, my goodness, we're not even a quarter of the way through. So yeah, just kind of keep that perspective, especially when you're approaching bets and all the narratives wrapped up in these teams. But man, it's definitely been a fun start to the season here.
And we'll touch base on the Heisman a little bit later. But like you said, with just barely being a quarter in the season, we may have 3 or 4 more different Heisman favorites by the end of the year. So, you know, a lot can happen. I mean, we've seen people kind of come out of nowhere and, win the award in teams for sure. So one thing I want to get right into, man, I was kind of thinking about this the other day. So we did have some coaching changes with obviously Deshaun Foster getting let go from UCLA, and seems like a nice enough guy, but was definitely way over his head. And Brent Pry leaving Virginia Tech kind of got me thinking a little bit, and I wanted your opinion on this. We look at, quote unquote elite jobs, and hey, this is a top 5 job, top 10, and certainly no one will put UCLA in there, but a lot of people think that Virginia Tech is a great job. Given the portal and the state of things, is there really such a thing as a great job versus a worse job, or is it just NIL collective? Because, I mean, you look at a team like Cal, who we'll talk about later, who they were projected to have 3 or 4 wins, and they have a freshman quarterback that's awesome, and they're 3-0. It's like all you need is the right player to come in, and then it could become an elite job. I mean, a la Indiana. What are your thoughts on kind of, I guess, those jobs and, some other ones that might open a la Florida or, Wisconsin or Oklahoma State?
Yeah, I think the branding of a great job has changed because it's not just about the money. Now all these schools are coming up with money to actually pay the coach's salary, right? So money's not really kind of a prohibitive factor anymore, where the SEC coaches that get bought on are going to be making substantially more than like the Big 10 coaches or ACC coaches or Big 12 coaches. Now, there is, I think, the level of investment that these programs are overseeing. For example, Stanford isn't the job that it was under David Shaw and Harbaugh, right? Like, the investment isn't there. They know their limitations from an academic standpoint. And now we're watching Stanford just kind of fall into the void. They're not willing to bring in the talent that's necessary to compete. And that's just unfortunate for those types of schools. And there's a number of schools like that kind of fit that bill. Now, there's also the side of the coin where I look at Kalen DeBoer taking Alabama. All the resources in the world, right? But you're following a coaching legend unless you win a national title. Like, that's literally the expectation every year. You are failing on some level. And when you come up even disastrously close, don't even make the college football playoff, well, you're already hot seated. That's just kind of how it goes. So in my eyes, the quote unquote great jobs to have in college football are the programs with not a lot of, historical success, that yet they're bought in, willing to buy players, willing to pay you your salary. And the regionality aspect, I feel like that's kind of out the window. You can recruit wherever now.
And I'm going to give you a couple coaches and just give me, I guess, a percentage chance on that they either get fired or walk away or resign, but AKA we know what that means, right? It was time to go for them. Give you a couple easy ones to start. I'm going to go with Mike Gundy at Oklahoma State.
Yeah, that's a retirement, and I don't know actually if he's going to retire. He kind of feels like the ones where he's just going to, it's going to be a mutual walking away sort of deal. And he's just such a football dude that it'd be surprising to me if he just completely walks away from the game. But yeah, it's definitely over at Oklahoma State. There's just no coming back from where this program is right now.
And a team that is playing my beloved Maryland Terrapins, you actually have two coaches in that game that I think could be on the hot seat, but we'll start with Luke Fickell, Wisconsin, a job that was once one of the Cadillac jobs, right? I mean, you were winning 10 games every year. They knew what they stood for, and now they're kind of toiling in the anonymity. So thoughts on Luke Fickell making it through the season or getting let go at the end of the year?
Yeah, and the investment is still there in the program, right? Like, they're going to bring in talent no matter who the head coach is. And I think it's even more of a testament to the administration at Wisconsin that Luke Fickell comes in there, wants to change up everything, right? He wants to move to an air raid. And so what do? They go get the guys who are air raid quarterbacks, Van Dyke, Tanner Mordecai from SMU. And now they're kind of rifling through a bunch of different names, Billy Edwards, and just a bunch of air raid sort of style QBs that fit that mold that Luke Fickell wanted to implement. Now Luke Fickell's changing the identity. He's going back to the run game. And all of a sudden, game one or big game number one against Alabama on the road, they get just absolutely blasted. In my eyes, Wisconsin is a far cry from what they used to be. I think there's a chance they actually lose this weekend as well against Maryland. And even if they do win, I feel like Luke Fickell's just a dead man walking if it were me, because Wisconsin, in my eyes, it should be held to a higher standard than what we've kind of seen so far.
I agree 100% with you, and I think the writing is on the wall, especially, we'll touch on this game a little bit later, but you have a school like Indiana and Illinois playing a game that, could get either one of them into the college football playoff, and then you got a team like Wisconsin just kind of, toiling in anonymity. And they seem, like you said, with the investment that they bought in, they seem like a school that's not going to sit there and let you just, figure it out. And like, we're cool with finishing in the middle of the pack. So the opposite coach in that game now, obviously College Park here, Rob, is a buzz with Malik Washington. And another start by the Terps where they're blowing out bad teams. And this is a first road test, 10.5 points. We'll talk about that game a little bit later as well, too. But do you think Loxley has a pass because he's going to see out Mike Washington's career? Or do you think if Maryland has a bad year this year, given the quarterback that he brought in, do you think Loxley could be gone?
I feel like Loxley's bar for a good season is so averagely low that he doesn't have to do too much to just kind of sit in that pocket of head coaching purgatory. And I feel like when you're talking about Maryland football in particular, they're not going to really push the envelope, right? If you get to bowl eligibility, if you're competitive in some of the big games, if you are still bringing in talent that excites the people and actually brings in people to the stadium, I don't really expect there to be a big move. Maryland football has seen the doldrums of the Big Ten. They have seen the doldrums of the ACC. And so if you're consistently winning, consistently competing, I don't think it's worth kind of moving off of that, knowing that your brand is out of a basketball school first. And so, yeah, I think Mike Loxley would have to do something disastrous to end up getting canned from this gig.
we're a long way away from that 44-3 Peach Bowl win against Tennessee or something like that. That was the score. I don't know if you remember that game, but those were the quote unquote glory days of Maryland football in my life. And here's one that I mentioned the first time that we talked, and I'm still a proponent of. I think he could be gone, whether it's mutually exclusive or leaving on his own terms. But you mentioned them 0-2 and Dabo Sweeney, and just a couple of facts that I saw during the game that kind of made me even more, bullish on that is he's said, I believe he's like 19-32 now when trailing at the half. And that just goes to show like he's a great motivator, maybe not necessarily a great X's and O's coach. So he always had better talent than everybody. And now that talent has kind of caught up, he's not winning nearly as many games. So another kind of 8-4 season, what is it going to take for them to get rid of Dabo? I mean, is Clemson that kind of program that they're going to be like, hey, we haven't had the success that we've had? Do you think they could pull that trigger, or do you think it's going to be another 3+ years maybe of him on there?
Dabo will never get fired. Dabo will call his career when he wants to call his career, because when you have national championships, plural, and you're bringing that team that was 7-5, mediocrity 8-4 prior to his tenure at the program, and even at the beginning part of his program, where every single big time game there was the narrative, oh, Clemson can't win the big one. And Taj Boyd, I remember those years of them just coming up ever so short or getting blown out even in the Orange Bowl and those sorts of things. Well, now they've experienced Trevor Lawrence. They've experienced Deshaun Watson. They have these national championship pedigrees, and it's because of that man. And so even if he is falling short of the expectations of a college football playoff run, last year he made the college football playoff and won the ACC. Right. I don't think Dabo will ever get fired, and truly, it's going to be a bad day in the Clemson life time when he does end up deciding to call it a career, in my opinion.
I think I saw this is his 5th loss against an unranked team since 2021, where he had 4 in his entire career prior to that. So, yeah, I mean, Clemson is definitely trending a little bit downward, but you're right. I don't think they can fire him, but, stranger things have happened with him possibly walking away, and who knows, right, another mediocre year and not embracing the portal. Who knows what could happen in there, but maybe give us a couple of hot names that, might be good coaching hires that you think landed one of these jobs, or, if Rob Donaldson was starting a team, a program like a UCLA, who would you hire as your first choice?
There's a number of dudes who I think are, in my eyes, like if I'm running like an NCAA football dynasty, sim through or something crazy like that in video game style, where the repercussions that if a guy falls flat, it's not my fault. I'm going outside the box, right? I'm looking at Trailer at UTSA. I'm looking at Heck over at New Mexico. I'm looking at a lot of those coaches that I think bring a unique, approach to the game. And I want to see that upside at my big university. I don't want the established guys who I already know what they're established to succeed for. I want the dudes who have had little resources and have overachieved in their capacities. I think of like an Alex Golesh right now with South Florida. Right. We'll see how that season plays out, but I love that team. I love his approach offensively. We'll see if he's a defensive-minded guy, but right now in the sport of football, offense wins, and he's got an offense that I think hums no matter who is playing QB or at running back or at wide receiver. So, yeah, those would be some names that just immediately come to mind. I wouldn't even be upset at something like a Monken from Army getting a shot somewhere with better resources, because I think if you can win with the triple option and that sort of like, approach or mindset to a game, Kenu Matalolo, same thing. I think you can overachieve anywhere. And yeah, that's just kind of my viewpoint on that kind of coaching hire thing.
Right. And to your point with Trailer, I mean, it could be as simple, or whoever North Texas coaches, the model of just Coach Sig. You got a guy at JMU who's had success. He brings his players with him. Indiana makes a college football playoff. And Indiana, no disrespect to them, maybe they have a little bit more resources than UCLA, but they're not a Virginia Tech, when it comes to football prowess and resources. So maybe that could be a model that people just kind of look at. But all the names that you mentioned, I think will definitely end up somewhere, if not this coaching cycle, definitely the next one. So, yeah, we'll get into a couple surprise teams here, man. It's wild just seeing some of the kind of these teams I'm going to be going through. And I didn't think that I would ever be mentioning this first team anywhere near, them being 3-0 and, giving me your thoughts if they're a pretender or a contender. But we're going to go with the Cal Golden Bears, and I'm going to let you pronounce their quarterback's name and let me know your thoughts on the man. And are they a pretender or a contender?
Well, they are. I think anytime you come into a season with two quarterbacks, it can mean two different things, right? It can mean, oh man, we're about to see something extremely ugly, a la Colorado, where they have three quarterbacks and they don't know who's going to start. And then they're going back to the guy that they started with. And then you have a team like a Cal that takes a chance on the complete unknown, and in our eyes, unknown. They probably heralded him right out of college. They knew when he walked on campus that he was going to be one of those dudes. Obviously, going up against Devin Brown, who's kind of a more quote unquote proven commodity, not overly proven, but we know what his skill set actually is. And they ended up going with the more kind of jackpot unknown type of guy. And Justin Wilcox is doing it again, man. Like, this is again a coach that's overachieved based on the expectations set forth on him during this tenure. And for that reason, do I believe in California in terms of like winning the ACC? No. But do I think that they could be a team that surprises us with like 8 wins, potentially even that 9-win fringe? Absolutely. They almost picked off Miami last year at home. They should have. They were up by 3 touchdowns at halftime or whatever it was. So, yeah, I do feel like something's humming out there in California. And I do think that Justin Wilcox is the man for the job as long as he's not getting picked away from it.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. It seems wild that Cal would even be in that conversation. I mean, they're going off at ridiculous money to win the ACC, but here's their remaining schedule. And I haven't watched your video yet, but I could see San Diego State possibly being a bet that you might lay with them getting the 13.5. But Cal has San Diego State at Boston College, home against Duke, home against North Carolina, at Virginia Tech, home against Virginia, at Louisville, at Stanford, and home against SMU. Not exactly a daunting murderer's row there. I mean, I don't see 4 losses on that schedule if this quarterback's playing the way that he is. So I don't think they're getting there. You don't think they're, 9 wins sounds good, but there will be less shocking things based on that schedule for me. But, again, you got to live up to now that you have those expectations. Let's see if they can win the games that they're quote unquote supposed to be. But yeah, 9 wins at Cal, like you said, would be amazing and get into a bowl game. So yeah. Number 2, I think everybody's darling. We fell in love with them last year. Diego Pavia and our boys at Vanderbilt. Haven't seen what they're going off at to win the SEC or the college football playoff, but obviously with the SEC schedule, can Vandy get in? Are they a pretender or are they a contender for you?
I think they're a contender, and this is a kind of another example. You used Coach Sig going from James Madison to Indiana of terms of like importing a roster, right? Well, Jerry Kill as the OC and analyst sort of role imported Diego Pavia and just this kind of guns a-blazing style from New Mexico State. And last year we saw the immediate benefits at a school in Vanderbilt that, again, had kind of been in the doldrums for over a decade. And all of a sudden they knock off Alabama at home. They give Tennessee a game at home. 2 teams that were fighting for a college football playoff spot up until the final 2 weeks of the season. Tennessee actually already made that college football playoff as well. And right out the gate this year, yeah, I get it. Lenore Sellers goes down. That kind of puts a little bit of a weird skew on the South Carolina game, but they beat the brakes off that team. Yep. And, that's still saying something, even if a team doesn't have a quarterback. Alabama couldn't beat Wisconsin with their backup in the game like that. So there's a lot of examples I can point to, but when you have a quarterback, you're a competitor, and they have the pieces around the quarterback to be even more of a competitor than just the 8-4, 7-5 type team. So yeah, I think Vandy's 100% legit to make a college football playoff run.
Yeah, and on FanDuel, they're plus 920 right now to make the college football playoff. So definitely some great value there. And a team that has surprised me, and full disclosure, all they had to do was not have a 67-yard touchdown run, and I would have covered that Kansas bet. So they kind of screwed me with some money there. But the Missouri Tigers just absolutely running the ball, and you got the quarterback, the Penn State transfer there, and Coach Strink. That team seems to be humming on all cylinders with that offense. They're at plus 310 to make the college football playoff. What are your thoughts on Missouri?
I think we're going to learn a lot about them this weekend, because even if Lenore Sellers doesn't play, South Carolina has a defense and a good ground game. And with a week of prep, knowing that your quarterback isn't the guy you can lean on anymore, I do feel like there's going to be a little bit of a better game plan from South Carolina to limit the opposing offense because they can't score points in this game. South Carolina's going into this game thinking that, hey, we got to keep the score in the 19, like the 10s. We got to keep it below 20. And if Bo Perbula, ends up getting affected by that type of strategy, all of a sudden, that one great output against Kansas, the only team that's kind of reputable that they've played so far, well, now all of a sudden we're rewriting the narrative on him, right? That could be a very fast switch in a lot of people's minds if he struggles this weekend. And yeah, I do want to see them go out there, play really well before I say, oh yeah, I'm bought in on Missouri for being Central Arkansas, Louisiana, and tearing up a bad Kansas defense. Like I want to see one more game against a team that I know potentially has the ability to stop them.
Well, what did we see last year where they got up to rank number 8 and they were everyone's kind of darling, and then they were
right.
road dogs against Texas A&M, who was unranked and got the break speed off of them. So I mean, we could see kind of that same thing with Missouri, where they kind of build their way up and they're kind of paper tigers there, no pun intended. With that, but yeah, between Vandy and Missouri, I actually think I kind of like Vandy's chances a little bit better based on kind of the analysis that you gave. So just a couple more, and this is a team that I know we had both talked about. It wouldn't have been surprised prior to the season if we saw them in the ACC championship, and that is the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. Everybody seems to be on board now with them. So pretender or contender in the ACC. I mean, obviously, we think they can get there, but can they get to the championship? But can they get over the hump and get to the playoff?
Well, this is one of those teams that runs the ball really effectively, and their defense has significantly improved as well. A very over-aggressive style of offense and defense in terms of kind of how they get people open across the field on crossers, how they run their quarterback into basically the ground every single game. He is their primary rusher, and defensively, they blitz the heck out of you. And that's really fun. That's really exciting. That's going to win you some games against teams that might have you a little bit more out athleted, right? Or have more athleticism. But when you are talking about the grand scheme of things, although I do think Georgia Tech is probably one of my favorite teams to win the ACC, I think once they go up against a team like a Georgia, the second last week of the season, we're going to see potentially them get a little bit exposed in areas because I don't know if they can pass the ball down the field. That's what I'm seeing right away from Haynes King is that's a big red flag. I was hoping to see a little bit of a jump. That jump has not been there. And although they can run the ball really effectively with kind of these wild variations, and they can blitz you and get fourth down stops when the other team is going for it near the goal line, how conducive is that to long-term success? I think they'll have to get better as the season goes on here, but I do think they're a good team. I think they'll win 10 plus games. It's just a matter if they can be even better than that when it actually comes push to shove.
They seem like that exact kind of team where if they do sneak in, I mean, I'm laying the wood against whoever is playing them at home in the college football playoff. It was like the Penn State SMU kind of matchup. Whoever draws Georgia Tech in that game, that's where Georgia Tech season is going to end, and they're going to get exposed, much to your point. That could be like a 44-3 kind of trouncing, or, where Georgia Tech scores less than 10 points in that. So last one we'll go over, and also Georgia Tech is plus 176 to make the college football playoff, and heavily juiced to the no at minus 220. So I definitely would not touch that one. But last one here, team that has a big game today or big game Saturday, the Nebraska Cornhuskers. I'm never a Nebraska believer. I can't, lay any sort of money on them to trust them, but I do kind of like them against Michigan, but their schedule is not that daunting. So Nebraska, if they win this game, look at the remaining rest of the schedule that they have. What are your thoughts on the Cornhuskers?
I get myself in hot water every single time I talk about the Huskers because, I'm not a Dylan Raiola believer whatsoever. In fact, I think if you're looking at the scope of the Big Ten, throw out the numbers. I'm just talking about what he looks like when he's throwing on the run, what he looks like when he's throwing out routes and corner routes and down the field. It's not impressive. I mean, you can find this from almost 90 QBs in college football right now, the things he does on every single Saturday. And, whether that's kind of fair to him, or maybe he's one of those guys that, quote unquote, is too young, needs to develop a little bit, that's fine. But when we're talking about Nebraska and who they are right now, development is irrelevant. We're looking at the current product. And I do feel like Nebraska from that standpoint does have a little bit of some athletes on defense, We need to see them go up against somebody that isn't Akron or Cincinnati, who looks completely inept offensively, though, before we just draw the conclusion that they're back to the black shirts. And from that side of things, if you're asking me, do I believe in Nebraska as a true college football playoff contender or a team that can win the Big Ten? Absolutely not. This is going to be a building block weekend for sure, their first real test. But I don't think that regardless of the result this weekend, I'm going to feel a whole lot different until they actually face some like real up type of competition.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. And I was kind of chuckling to myself when you were talking about how he can't throw on the run. And I go, well, there go all the Mahomes comparisons, because that's certainly something that Patrick Mahomes can certainly do. So that's where, can we stop with the comparisons, please? Like, if you can't throw on the run, you're not Patrick Mahomes. And if you can't make plays out of the pocket, you're not Patrick Mahomes. So it's a nice little shtick, but yeah, like, go beat Michigan and then, maybe we'll talk about that. But yeah, love to the Huskers, though. College football is better when Nebraska's good. And, passionate fan base. I promise you, Rob and I do not hate the Huskers, even though he is an Iowa fan, but we just can't trust them. So, but yeah, man, I guess to touch base on the conference, I think is wild. And I was on with our boy DJ a while back, and he says hi, by the way, and we were talking about how he was never a Big 12 believer. I love the Big 12. It's going to be my favorite conference to watch. Just given the parity, you have no idea who's going to win it. So I'm going to ask you who's going to win it, and I'm going to go over some of the odds right now on FanDuel to win the conference, and they're all plus money, and you let me know what you think is going to happen. But we have the two favorites are Utah and Texas Tech, obviously both playing today at plus 420 and plus 440. You have your boy Josh Hoover at TCU at plus 650, Baylor at plus 650, Iowa State, which seems weird as a ranked team, at plus 700, Arizona State at plus 900. I'm going down pretty far here, but Kansas plus 1,300, BYU plus 1,800, Arizona plus 22, and Houston plus 22. If you were making a bet and you could only bet one of those sides, who would you take and why?
Yeah, I'm looking at Utah, and this was a team that I wanted to see it from Kyle Dillingham before I bought in. I remember coming into the preseason, they weren't a team that I was bought in on. They weren't a team that I was selling on because of the kind of the traditional hype that surrounds him as just a head coach and as a program. But they've defeated all my doubts in the early goings. And it's not just because they tromped on UCLA. It's not just because they've beaten up on some teams that they were obviously superior than. It was that when I'm looking at Dampier at quarterback, he's an upgrade over Cam Rising, and Cam Rising was a guy that when he was healthy, everybody was saying, hey, this is a guy who could win the Heisman. Well, I never really saw that with Cam Rising, because in big games, it kind of felt like he couldn't push the ball downfield. He was too over reliant rather on the ground game and his athleticism. Well, Dampier has that athleticism times 10, and he actually does look to push the ball downfield. So if you're looking at a team right now with, I think, more upside than just winning the Big 12 conference, but potentially doing something in the college football playoff, I think Utah is a team that I 100% look at there.
And I think what you do is whoever you like in this Utah-Texas Tech game, instead of betting the game, you bet them to win the Big 12, right? So at plus 420 or plus 440, whoever you like in that game, they're certainly going to have a leg up, and the odds are only going to go down for them. So instead of trying to lay the point spread or, whatever the money line is at minus money, just take the plus 440 there. I was on Texas Tech kind of coming into the season, but I do think it's the reason I went so far down is we saw Arizona State at plus 1,800 win it last year. So I do think it's wide open. Utah was supposed to be last year what they're doing this year. So I do agree with you that on paper, they're probably the most complete team and the best, given the fact that they now do have some explosiveness on offense, which was kind of prohibiting them the last couple of years. But this game is going to be awesome. Too bad it's a 10 a.m. Mountain Time kickoff, but Utah, Texas Tech, we'll talk about. We'll break that game down a little bit later. But awesome game. If you're not a Big 12 fan, just this conference is going to be wild. And sadly, I think they only get one team in, but I would love to see, them get the respect that they deserve. And, a couple of teams beating up on each other. Maybe you put in a 2 or 3 loss Big 12 team, given kind of the state of the college football playoff currently. But it's going to be fun to watch, man. And, any of these guys, Dampier or Baron Morton or even Josh Hoover or Sawyer Robertson for Heisman, I mean, there could be worse bets to get made there for sure. So awesome. Well, yeah, I guess just want to touch base with you on a little bit of like now where you're sitting, maybe some interesting playoff futures bets that you will be willing to make. One that I kind of think is intriguing, and I don't want to be a prisoner of the moment, but I think I've seen enough of a sample size to obviously know that Arch Manning isn't the number one overall pick like people are getting him to be. But to me, how can you put money on Texas to make the college football playoff given the schedule that they have? They're not going to be Georgia. They're probably not going to be Oklahoma with the way he's playing. Texas is plus money to not make it. It's plus like 140 to not make the college football playoff. I kind of like that bet. Call me an idiot or tell me maybe there's some merit to it, but what are your thoughts on that? And is there another one that maybe you like that might be kind of off the radar or surprise people?
No, I really do like that one that you just listed. I also kind of look at across the board in the SEC, and you just kind of brought them up. But Oklahoma, for the first time, Brett Venables, since he was at Clemson, has an offense, right? He has a guy who doesn't just move the ball downfield in these sort of short increments that are going to be successful against the teams that they have better athletes than. No, he's a guy who goes and makes things happen down the field in the intermediate by himself with his legs. And that defense that we know from Clemson, from Oklahoma in the early parts of his tenure, that's never been the problem. I do feel like Oklahoma making the college football playoff and potentially even making it like a nice little fun run is 100% in the cards. And so, yeah, I'm looking at the Red River rivalry, of, hey, Texas, Oklahoma. I think two teams are going in opposite directions. And yeah, I'm very excited to bet on that game. I think I know which way I'm going.
That'll definitely be in Rob's best bets. I have a slight feeling a little lean there, for a couple weeks out. But yeah, it'll also be interesting to see if Arch gets a short leash in either that game or how long Texas can kind of toil in anonymity, or not anonymity, but struggling to beat the likes of UTEP or whoever they played, where it was a much closer game. And it's like once you get into the heart of your meat of your SEC schedule, no one's scared by that Texas offense. And if you go up against the Georgia defense, they're going to be licking their chops, and certainly Brett Venables' defense. So it's very, very interesting to see that we're going to have more faith in Mateer heading into that game than we are Arch Manning when, before the season, obviously Arch was everyone's golden boy. Mateer was kind of just on the fringe there. But yeah, I agree with you with Oklahoma. I didn't want to be sold on them, but also one positive too with them. I think it's almost a certainty that they make the college football playoff, given the fact that I think they can afford to lose about 3 games and get in, which not a lot of teams from other conferences have that luxury, especially because they're going to have a couple big wins in there. So even if they don't make the SEC title game, them getting in and making a run is not out of the realm of possibility. So I feel like if you're looking for value, you got to look at a team that will be okay even if they don't make their conference championship and they lose because maybe they have 2 or 3 losses and still get in, because that gives you much more wiggle room. And I think that's exactly where we're at with Oklahoma there. So good pull on that one. And that game is going to be awesome. Have you ever been to the Red River rivalry?
Never before. It would be definitely a blast though.
Yeah. They say everything's fried there. So I'm just picturing like me getting rolled out like Violet Beauregard and Willy Wonka, turning into a blueberry and just having to roll me out of that stadium if I go there and eat. But yeah, it's definitely on the bucket list as well, along with the Florida Georgia game. But yeah, man. So I guess we'll get into something else here. So basically, we talked a couple about futures bets, but I know kind of your bread and butter here. A little bit of you had hyped this team earlier. The group of 5. I mean, we saw USF kind of almost turned into a pumpkin a little bit with Miami. I mean, really tough ask for them to get up again week by week and go in there and just kind of as a 17-point underdog again against a team that's rolling, kind of be competitive in that game. I don't think it hurts South Florida's chances that much, but I did write down a couple teams and their chances to get in there. But I mean, talk about the likes of USF, North Texas, UNLV, Boise State, and we got right now at and Tulane. Tulane is the favorite of all the group of 5 teams at plus 250 to make the college football playoff, and they are at Ole Miss. Is it almost a certainty that the team is coming out of the American, or do you think a UNLV or another team out of a different conference will represent the group of 5? And is Boise out, or do they still have a chance?
Yeah, no, I think Boise still has a chance because that's kind of a self-correcting thing of, hey, UNLV and Boise potentially could be in a clash down the road, in the Mountain West title type of game. And on top of that, when you're looking at USF, if you're dogging them, you don't know the sport because they have the toughest schedule in the country so far, and it's not even remotely close. 3 straight ranked teams in a row. Like, I get it. Florida's no longer ranked. Boise's no longer ranked. But when you have those kinds of expectations and you're going into ruckus environments like Gainesville, like Miami, the Garden, where everybody's wanting to crown Miami for beating Notre Dame early on, well, what are we doing here for Doc and USF in that case? But USF would still be my team. Tulane would be the team that I would look at second in that category. And I think when you're looking at UNLV, that's a team that I think is going to self-correct itself because I don't really buy in to what they're selling right now. They have a quarterback sort of rotation that I don't think is going to be conducive of long-term success. And also Dan Mullen, year one out in Vegas, like it's not really a juiced up environment for one, his program, his regime, and also just UNLV in general. It does not bring out a lot of fans. So there's going to be a lot of teams that have a good crack at beating UNLV in that building this season. But yeah, I look at USF, I look at Tulane. Boise State's definitely still in that mix, but those two teams in particular, USF and Tulane, would be my choices right now.
So you're not a fan of the turnover slot machine that they have at UNLV?
Hey, it's unique. I think that's building some fun culture, and you got to do something out there to kind of build this program back up because right now it's lifeless. Nobody really cares. And even when they're winning, nobody cares. So you got to find another way to bring fans to the stadium.
Well, they're only laying 2.5 at Miami of Ohio against your Miami of Ohio Red Hawks. So very, very interesting game there with that line. And I think that line tells you exactly your point. All you need to know, Vegas is not high on this team at all. No disrespect to Miami of Ohio and the MAC, but you expect a team like UNLV traveling to a MAC school if they were really the group of 5 contender that everyone says that line would be much higher. So
right.
Kind of agree with you on that. I would love to see Navy come out, but again, I thought Navy kind of blew its wad last year. So I think you're right there. It's either Tulane or USF, and I do think that both of them could make a little bit of noise when they get in there. I mean, USF especially, given the kind of gauntlet of the schedule that they played here. So, yeah, man. So we kind of talked a little bit about it, and I had Sam Panayotovich on a while back, and we were talking about Heisman, and he had mentioned that in the last 10 years, the Heisman favorite coming into the preseason had only won the Heisman. I believe it was 0 or 1 time. And obviously we saw Arch come in as the favorite and fall off the face of the earth. And, most people are telling you, hey, it wasn't good to bet the favorite there. But, given, so many good quarterbacks that are out there and the cyclical nature of it going back and forth, we know you had a flyer with CJ Bailey. We know you had some Marcel Reed stock. Is there anyone similar to those guys or a guy kind of down there that you could see making a move? And how would you bet the Heisman now, or what is your advice for betting on it? Is it just a wait and see kind of game, or do you grab a horse that you might like now and just hope that they kind of get there?
Yeah, well, John Mateer was the third one that I took a flyer on, and now he's the favorite, right? Like it's a whole cyclical thing where Jeremiah Smith could go off this weekend, and all of a sudden people are like, you know what? Jeremiah Smith is actually my guy. I changed my mind. And so I think if you are going to pick a horse, though, you do have to look at the next 2 weeks because otherwise you're just kind of picking, you're not getting good equity when these good performances do come about. You're just buying in after the explosion, which is fine maybe if you just want to buy in late and be late to the party. But I think if you want to take a little bit of a lesser kind of front end stab, it needs to be pretty soon. And yeah, I still love what John Mateer is doing out there. I love CJ Bailey. I think he's not putting up necessarily the passing numbers or the total yardage numbers necessary to win it. He's looked incredible, though. And Marcel Reed, I think that if he puts out a really good second half here to the SEC season, he is definitely still in the mix there. So yeah, I do feel good about my Heisman Flyers.
Well, Rob, you know what they say. Every time CJ Bailey throws a touchdown pass, an angel gets its wings. So we're hoping for some more CJ Bailey touchdown passes there. But yeah, I mean, and to your point there, I mean, like liking a team like Utah to get to the college football playoff, why not then put money on Dampier, right? Because if they're going to get there, they're obviously winning, and they're going to get there because of him. So winning your conference has a lot of equity in there. So maybe find a team that you like if you like Texas Tech, put it on Morton kind of thing, and to your point, yeah, it has to be kind of done now. Otherwise, you're just chasing really, really bad equity there. And then just if that person does somehow have flop on the last game of the season and you have a Tua versus Kyler Murray kind of situation there, then you're really, really at some bad odds there. So awesome, man. Well, I haven't had a chance to watch your video yet. Rob's Best Bets, like I mentioned to you the other day on Twitter, it's my Seinfeld, right? One of my all-time favorite shows on there. But yeah, I want to break down, obviously some of the big games and then get a couple of your best bets. But we're going to go through some of the ranked matchups first, some of the big games that we have. If you don't have a play on it, just let me know which way you'll be leaning. But if you have strong conviction on either one, I'm going to start with Indiana, Illinois. And the reason I'm starting with this game is I really, really love the fact that I was not an Illinois believer, but I really love similar to what I talked about earlier, Illinois to make the college football playoff right now is at plus 710. If you think Illinois has a chance winning that game, bet them to make the college football playoff instead of betting them to win this game because their schedule, they don't play Penn State, they have USC, and they have Ohio State. If they win one of those two games and beat Indiana, they're in the college football playoff. So what are your thoughts? Coach Sig is laying 6.5 at home against a top 10 team. Does he just come out and bludgeon them, or are you on the Illini?
I'm not a believer in Indiana. I just look at Fernando Mendoza, and I think that once teams can put pressure on him, we're going to see the real Fernando Mendoza show up. Because when we watched him at Cal, he was frantic. He did have a strong arm, threw with a lot of velocity, had the athleticism to get away from a lot of that pressure. But in the Big Ten, when you have teams that design pressures to eliminate that kind of scramble drill type of offense, I'm going to wonder how good of a passer he ends up being. And so I need to kind of see it. Man, this is going to be the first game where I do think an opponent can put that kind of pressure on him. I do think Illinois is going to have a chance to win this game outright. And I didn't bet it that 6.5 because I do think this game is going to be lived in those touchdown departments. But at the same time, I do feel like Illinois is a pretty good value bet at that type of odds.
So, and then any merit to betting them at plus 710 to make the college football playoff, because obviously that number will go way down if they win this game.
Yeah, I think if you want that equity in your bag 100%, they have an established quarterback over 3 years. How many teams in college football have that type of guy, right? I mean, everybody was anointing Clemson for having Cade Klubnik under that same distinction, and everybody was like kind of avoiding the fact that Illinois it had Luke Altmaier, who I think is actually a better quarterback than Cade Klubnik. And so, yeah, from that standpoint, why not try to get on that equity if you do believe Illinois is going to win this game?
And I don't want to be an Illinois believer, so I'm probably not going to touch that game, but definitely going to sprinkle at the plus 710 just in case they do end up living up to the hype there and winning that game in Bloomington. But very, very interesting game. And we never thought we would ever see Indiana laying almost a full touchdown and extra point against a top 10 team, even in Bloomington. So crazy, crazy world we're living in here. Sticking in the Big Ten, I know near and dear to my heart and your heart as we're both in Big Ten country here, but my beloved Maryland Terrapins, and basketball does start in, about a month and a half. So more pumped about Maryland basketball, but Terps getting some buzz here. No pun intended again with that, with Malik Washington and heading to Camp Randall where we know they're going to be jumping around. And if Gus Johnson's on the call, we know Gus will love that, but he's probably going to be on the Utah call. But we talked about Wisconsin earlier. You said, hey, they might not even win this game. 10.5-point line, and it's gone up in Wisconsin's favor or gone, with money coming in. I think it opened at like 7.5, somewhere around there. So a lot of people thinking that the Badgers are going to obviously cover that. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, is this a game that Maryland can take outright, or are you definitely taking the 10.5?
I'm definitely taking the 10.5. I feel like people are buying into a Wisconsin bounce back. And yeah, if they had James White, Monty Ball, or Melvin Gordon in the backfield, I'd probably be like, hey, yeah, sign me up for that bounce back at Camp Randall. But I don't think the fact that this place is jumping or that they might have Billy Edwards back excites me at all. I think this is a bad team. I think it's bad coach team. And I do think that Maryland, yeah, they're probably not the most big time world beaters in the world, but if they can put up 17 points, I think they cover this game. And I do feel like Maryland is capable of putting up 2 touchdowns at the very least on the board against the Badgers. So yeah, go ahead and give me that 10.5. We're just getting better numbers at this point.
There you go. You're going to talk me into it, Rob, and then come Sunday, I'm going to be sitting there like 12:30 when we turn the ball over for the 4th consecutive time and be like, God damn it, what the hell is I thinking? But yeah, I mean, you're right. It almost seems like it seems too easy. The fact that the line's just gone, more towards Maryland, they're getting up over 10.5, and I haven't seen a move since then. But yeah, jump on it now before people start to realize what they're going to do. by putting money on Wisconsin. So, and great game here, the Jackson Arnold Bowl, we'll call it here, with your boy John Mateer going against Jackson Arnold in Norman, Oklahoma. Kind of maybe see if Auburn's a little bit fraudulent there. They had a big win against Baylor. But great game there in Norman, Oklahoma, laying 6.5 with a total of 46.5. What are your thoughts on that game? You got to play one way or the other.
I think it's going to be a good game, in particular, just because, again, John Mateer is one of those dudes who can put up numbers, I think, against anybody. Now, it's going to be the first real test for Brent Venables against an offense that we know is kind of conducive to finding success, because that's Hugh Freeze's whole shtick, right? Like, if he can't move the ball, he's worthless to you as a head coach. And maybe he is just the worthless head coach that's destined to get canned this season. But I do think that if Oklahoma is going to have that kind of ramp up game against a good offense where they can hit you in a number of different ways, it's here. It wasn't the Michigan game with a freshman QB coming in there for the first time. It's going to be against a QB that's kind of seeing these ruckus environments, seeing these good defenses, and obviously the connection of him already having played against his Oklahoma defense in practice. So yeah, I think Oklahoma is going to find a way to win this game, but that margin of kind of error with the spread, it has me staying away entirely from this spot.
Now, this game, as soon as I saw it come out, I thought it was a Rob Donaldson special all over. So you have Ole Miss coming with, the backup quarterback coming in and going lights out against Arkansas, hosting Tulane at plus 12.5 for Tulane with a total of 61.5. Obviously, a lot of points expected in that game. And do you think it's better with a big number if the game is supposed to be a shootout? Does that make you more or less likely to take a big number like that with the underdog?
I actually think if it ends up kind of destined to be a shootout, I want to lay the points with the team with the better offense, because if the game is scored in increments of touchdowns, well, there goes your whole point of taking 12.5. You want a 14.5 type line, right? And so, yeah, ultimately 12.5 doesn't really do anything for me. It does kind of feel like a bait to take Tulane because it feels like just enough points. But in reality, again, if you're scoring every 5 minutes, 12.5 type line is just 3 total possessions in a span of 6 minutes of game time. So yeah, I would probably look to lay it with Ole Miss, but at the same time, don't love either side of that coin.
And one game too that I was kind of on them last week, at LSU, the Florida Gators, and I think there's still that, myth that maybe Miami isn't as good because of Mario Cristobal, because of Carson Beck, for whatever reason. That line is still around 8.5, kind of what it was at, for most of the week against LSU. And, you saw obviously Florida go into Death Valley and throw 5 interceptions and still, maybe almost sort of kind of cover that number. Miami coming off of a bludgeoning of South Florida. They seem to be for real. Have you bought in Miami enough to think that they're going to be able to cover an 8.5 point spread against a very, very desperate Florida team that at least has a good quarterback and their coach kind of fighting for his life? Are you a Miami believer in that?
Well, I don't know if they have a good quarterback, but I feel like he's a better quarterback than what we saw last week. And
Fair.
Ultimately, that's all that matters, where if DJ Lagway doesn't turn the ball over and just is a capable game manager with athleticism, that's all he needs to be to have a great defense behind him on the other side to really keep them in pretty much every game that they play against anybody. Like, I truly believe that. And Carson Beck is not a world beater. I know it's kind of made out that that's a fact because of what he did against Texas A&M. But if you watch the Texas A&M game, my goodness, those wide receivers were bailing him out all across the board the entire game. There were some insane, like Odell Beckham-esque catches in that mix that resulted in touchdowns. And I get it. Carson Beck is a good game manager type. I've always kind of said that about him. But in terms of that next level, I don't think it's there with him. So no, I don't want to be laying over a touchdown. And the only reason we're getting this line is because of Florida having lost last 2 games. And I feel like their losses against LSU on the road, in Baton Rouge at night, and then against a good USF team by a field goal at the buzzer are not the worst losses in the world.
I agree. I'll probably end up pulling the trigger on Florida, especially if that line moves in any sort of direction again, back on the horse with the Gators there. And, Rob, I know you're the best man. I know you built your brand and your everything off of the smaller schools. So I'm going to give you a real small school here, a couple of them. And it's one of my buddies. He does do some kind college football officiating, and he is a side judge, and he is at Lycoming College this week for the 1-1 Dickinson Red Devils at the 0-2 Lycoming Warriors. So, any thoughts on that game and a lean either way on Dickinson versus Lycoming?
Well, hey, I'm looking at the records right now. You gave me a nice little tee up for this one because I truly have no clue. But when I'm looking at Dickinson and the Red Devils, something's speaking to me. And I never like betting on an 0-2 team like Lycoming when you're talking about early season not having played up in competition. So go ahead and give me Dickinson in that game.
There you go. Fair enough. So, okay, I don't think we could find a line on that one, but yeah, we know they're not Mountain Union or Wisconsin Whitewater or whoever is the Division III representative now, but yeah, those might be the only teams worthwhile of putting any money in there. But excellent stuff on the Division III football there. So appreciate that. Appreciate that analysis there. Yeah, man. So again, talk about your page, your videos, raw best bets, and then we'll get maybe your 3 best bets for it. But just, I guess, talk about the video, and for those of you who don't know when it comes out, just where people can find your content at.
Yeah, just youtube.com and my name, Rob Donaldson. And this weekend, a couple bets that I'd be looking at in terms of, I guess, like my favorites on the board. Clemson early against Syracuse, laying the 17 points. If you can still find that round 17, I love that proposition. I think this is a true Dabo type of bounce back spot. And I don't necessarily always buy into that kind of narrative, but in particular with Syracuse not really having an offense to speak of, that's 100% an area that I'm looking at there. And also a little bit off the radar game that I love, Eastern Michigan taking on Louisiana. I love Eastern Michigan, man. I think we can buy in at Coach Creighton and have an 0-3 squad that is actually playing better football. I think they're going to win that game outright on the money line, just a better team. And then the last one that I'll hit you with here is Kansas laying the 13.5 against West Virginia. West Virginia's coming off the brawl against Pitt, went to overtime. It was emotional. Coach Rodriguez was fired up. I feel like sometimes when you're coming off that emotional high, whether it's, Iowa State beating Iowa and then falling flat against Arkansas State on the road, it's one of those things that's destined to happen. So go ahead and give me the Jayhawks as my third final favorite bet on the board there.
So Rob Donaldson never paying for a drink or a meal in Ypsilanti, Michigan is what you're telling me there by being
that's
on
correct.
Eastern Michigan there. So I'm going to give you 2 real fast, or 3 that I kind of like. Let me know your thoughts, and then we'll wrap it up here. So I've been on all year the Oregon team total over. Obviously last week we saw very, very sleepy at Northwestern, kind of coming out, and they still were a touchdown away from covering that. So it's 44.5, and this is more so a couple factors. They're at home right now on the speedy turf, and just the fact that Oregon State absolutely stinks. I was one of my big plays is gonna be 44.5. I know it's a lot of points, but thoughts on that? Is a bet good or bad?
I don't think it's terrible, right? I think that when you are looking at kind of, again, just like the narrative angles and what's being pushed against certain teams that have not come out of the gates hot, everybody wants to go against the teams that are 1-2 or 0-3. And if you can find some equity or some betting value on those types of teams, one, you've already got a leg up based on perception. And also you probably got a leg up in terms of avoiding inflation in some of these lines as well. So yeah, I'd say go for it. And that's probably not a bad angle.
And a very interesting game here. We mentioned his name earlier, CJ Bailey. This line kind of stinks with Duke laying, 2.5 against NC State. NC State's team total is 27.5. I know you were on their team total in the Wake Forest game, and that hit pretty easily there. Seems like they could score 30 at will. And if you look at Duke, had they kept not turning the ball over and, made some miscues there, they did, gain quite a few yards there, and then kind of you lost it to Lane there. But that line kind of stinks a little bit. What are your thoughts on the Wolfpack, either the team total or getting the points or winning outright?
This was a game I stayed away from personally, just because I feel like when you're looking at NC State, they haven't really gone up against a defense that can actually hold their own, especially when you're talking about a freak of nature at quarterback and a ton of weapons at running back, at wide receiver, at even tight end for NC State. And Duke is one of those teams that defensively has the athletes to kind of make some moves, change some things up. They have enough film on what CJ Bailey is doing through 3 games of the season so far to maybe have his first kind of stifle game. Now, I think there's upside there that he could just break through it no matter how good the defense is. Like, that's always possible when you have a guy who's just a game breaker at the position. But ultimately, from a betting standpoint, it does give me enough hesitancy to be like, hey, I'm going to have fun watching that, but I don't want to have actual money on that.
And last one for you before we wrap up. I know you're a busy guy. World Series future. If you were putting money on one team to win the World Series, who are you going with?
Oh man, on the spot. Looking at just kind of how teams have been playing as of late, I think this Phillies Dodgers series has been very, very interesting. And ultimately, if Shohei Ohtani, if Glasnow, if Blake Snell, if these guys can't go deep into starts, Blake Snell just did the other night. The Dodgers won handily, but outside of that, two kind of starts of just going 5 innings. If the Dodgers don't have that front end sort of help to their starting rotation, I'm out on them. Give me the Phillies, and I do think the NL is going to be the team that ends up kind of having, or the league rather, that has the team that ends up winning the whole thing.
That was going to be a bet that I was going to look for as well too. Like, I don't know if you could bet on whatever, if you could bet on the winner coming out of the NL. But yeah, I don't think there's a team in the American League outside of maybe, I think the Red Sox might be the best choice, but whoever comes out of the NL is definitely winning the World Series. So I would agree with you on that. And Rob, next week I have a college basketball analyst on, so we're getting to that time, man. College basketball right around the corner. Major League Baseball playoffs, your bread and butter, man. So I really, really appreciate the time here. We'll have to get on talk some hoops, but I'm going to take us out with little girls of the SEC here. So thanks again for the time, man.
Thank you.
Take care.
When the southern leaves drop off the trees,